Hello and welcome to Mediumship Matters with me, Hannah McIntyre. And I'm very excited today to be joined by Lorriane Anderson, who is the author of beautiful books, beautiful oracle cards. I follow you on Instagram and everything is very beautiful. So welcome, Lorriane. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm really excited to talk to you too. So I just had to show you because I'm fangirling a little bit that I've got your cards right here. And they are they are beautiful cards with beautiful and unusual messages. And you've got like a series of seasons of the witch cards, haven't you?
That's right.
So what drew you to witches, witchcraft, and all of that?
I can't, so it's like a two-part answer, right?
Okay.
Because I've always been interested in it as a kid. I remember just like my parents watched any and all movies, like every movie humanly possible. I've always been involved in the movie industry. I've dated a movie editor, an independent film creator. Like movies are my jam. And the movies I love the most are the witchy and spooky and vampiric and all of those. So I would watch these things and I would always think, God, like I love all of this. I always felt like I resonated with it. Practical Magic is one of my mom's like all-time favorite movies. So we
Me
watched
too.
it all the time, right? And I always felt like I resonated with that. So, but to be fair, I was a little scared of it. And I was like, well, there's a lot of stigma around it. I don't know. And then kind of long story short, I really got into manifestation and the law of attraction. I was working in fashion at the time. Hated the job, loved the location of the job and the industry of the job. But I said to myself, I really want to find something that combines the two things that I love. And at that point, it was spirituality and apothecary and beauty products and all of that. And I said, I'm going to manifest a job that brings all my interests together. And after, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks of deciding that I was going to do that, I found this super vague listing on Craigslist for a job. I mean, I think it had like 3 sentences in it. And the reason why is because the owner of the company was a witch, like full on witch. And she was looking for people who had my specific skill set in e-commerce operations and logistics. And so I interviewed with her. We got off great and I started working for her. And then lo and behold, I had dropped myself into the world of witchery and witchcraft and kind of never looked back. So it was a long journey, but it just felt right. When I got there, it just felt like this was exactly where I needed to be. And I've been in it ever since.
So did she specifically write the job spec, the advert, so that someone would have to read between the lines to get it?
She specifically said that she wrote it vague because she felt like the right people would find it and would apply, and that she didn't want to give any details. She wanted someone who would intuitively know that this was the right space for me. And it really was like that. I mean, I couldn't even tell you what made me apply. When I read it, I was like, this says nothing. Like, I don't know if this is some sort of kidnapper situation, like, but I'm gonna apply anyway. I mean, you never know, right? I
Yeah, for
really, it
sure.
was so vague. I wish I still had the listing. I wish I had kept it because it was just so vague. But they were great. It was a husband and wife team, and we went out for coffee and everything like that. And she said, the people who were meant to find it will find it.
I love it. What an amazing story. So manifestation
Mhm.
was there a particular thing that got you into that? How did you start your journey with that, as you're obviously very successful at it?
Thank you. um, so we all remember that old school book, The Secret,
Yeah.
right? I had it, my mom had it because she saw it on Oprah, like, half of America. And she gave me a copy and I said, okay, I had read it once and I tried it, didn't really get anywhere with it, felt like this was BS. And I kind of just put it on a shelf. And then on the way to work every morning, I would walk past the shelf where he was sitting at. And I ignored this book for years. You know what I mean? She gave it to me when I was like a teenager. I completely just ignored this book for a very long time. And then one morning, I walked past the shelf and I saw it and I said, I'm going to read it. And I ended up reading it on my lunch break and just like plowed through it. I read it in like a day. I mean, it's an easy read, but I just kind of plowed through it. And I said, I can really do this. And I just started trying to manifest things. And I shouldn't admit this, but I did kind of manifest bringing an ex back. And I was like, holy shit, this really works, because he really came back. I don't use it for that reason anymore, mind
No.
you, but but I started doing things and I realized that it was really, really working. And it just felt like, it just felt right. It just felt like, okay, I can really do this. And little by little, I would manifest bigger things like the job. And then eventually, manifesting the books and the oracle decks and my business and certain partnerships and all of these things. And it just felt like, it's hard at times, but it's also exhilarating when you get it right. And it just felt so like beautiful to know that I could control more things about my life, especially when things feel really chaotic. It's really nice that you can stop and say, okay, I want this, and I can go and get it. And I feel like I have a practical plan to get me there.
Yeah.
And I come from an operations background. So like, and if you look at my birth chart, it's like basically water and earth. So I really like structure and organization. And I know manifestation is like woo woo, but it does have a structure to it. So for me, it feels like it hits both sides of my brain.
Yeah. Fascinating. So let's talk about your cards. You're stunning. I mean, stunningly beautiful, gorgeous designs, all the color. I love a bit of metallic. They're just lovely from start to finish. Every single one I pull is gorgeous. How did you what made you start with an oracle pack, or what made you think that was something you'd want to do?
Well, I knew I wanted to do an oracle deck. I've always wanted to do an oracle deck. That was tarot and oracle was really one of the first things that I really dabbled in when I started doing witchery and all of that. And at the time I was like obsessed with Colette Baron Reed, and she just has, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she has so
Yes.
many oracle decks now.
Yes.
And part of what I loved about her is that I felt like every deck she made, she brought something new and different. It wasn't the same sort of just repetitive process. Everything was a little bit different. So that was my thought going into it. But then I was working with Juliet Diaz at the time on a school called the School of Witchery, which she had started and I had joined later on. And we were just talking, we were like gabbing on the phone. I don't even remember what we were talking about. And we were like, she had found our previous our previous artist, Giada. And I saw her artwork and I was like, oh God, she would make a like amazing oracle deck.
Yeah.
And we started talking and we both kind of said the wheel at the same time. And then I started saying, well, love the Wheel of the Year, been working with it for a long time. The woman that I told you that I got the job with witchcraft, she was very into the Wheel of the Year. So it was something that I kind of learned right away. But then I said, I've never seen like whenever you talk about the Wheel of the Year, you hear about them all together, right? You hear about Samhain and then the rest of them kind of packaged together. Why isn't it that we don't break these things up? They each have their own energy. They're at different parts of the year. I feel like they should have their own space. And then somewhere out of the ether, the idea to do a series came along, and I said, we should do a series because each one of them really deserves, something special. We don't celebrate Christmas the same way we celebrate Easter,
Yeah.
or you know um and then I just said, let's just do a series, and it kind of just went from there. And thinking about it now, it was very audacious and ambitious, but I tend to think of like, I'm an ideas person, so whenever I can think of one idea and like kind of mind map it from there, it just happens. And that's what happened with that. Yeah, and here we are. Can you believe it will the last deck comes out the beginning of 2025. So it will be more than 7 years from start to finish since we
Wow.
started this.
That's the program.
Yeah,
A long time. That is.
a very long time.
That is. But I also love that you've just said about being audacious, because I do think you need to have a little bit of audacity to create the dreams that you want. If you sit in comfort and politeness forever, you'll never progress. So I love that you think big, and I love that you reach for that. Oh my God, where do I want to start with this? So, can you explain for somebody who has no idea what you mean when you say the Wheel of the Year? Let's start with that. What is the Wheel of the Year?
Okay, great question. So the Wheel of the Year, originally started as an agricultural calendar. Like that's really the nuts and potatoes of it, is knowing, when is it time to sow seeds? When is it time to really like milk the cows and prepare the medicines and the food and store all of that away? But the way our ancestors worked, agriculture was their livelihood. And so when things didn't work and when they had a bad crop, their natural inclination was to pray to gods or to hold festivals or to do something to say, we're humbled, we're asking for your help, we really need your support. And so it started off as an agricultural process, but it really morphed into these festivals and these celebrations to appeal to the cosmos and to say, we're doing whatever we think we got to do to make you happy. We want a good crop this year. We want to survive the winter. We're feeling down in the dumps on Imbolc. We need some hope and some inspiration for spring to come. Please send us a sign. And now we don't have to do all of that farming and stuff anymore. We have grocery stores and all of that stuff, but the cycles that each day on the wheel of the year represents still really shows up for us in our life. We still have periods of harvest where we're feeling really successful and we got a lot of things going on, and we may struggle with feeling like, oh, being in the spotlight is too much, like with Letha and Midsummer and the summer festivals. Sometimes being in the spotlight is a lot, even though you can say this is exactly what I wanted, but when you get there you realize, oh my god, all eyes on me, right?
Yeah.
The flip side is also true. I talk about Samhain a lot because it's the first one we started with, but I think the time of the year is so appropriate because there's a lot of kids who are going off to college for the first time and leaving home. My nephew just went off to college and I was talking to his mom about it, and she's like, I'm he's not my little boy anymore.
No.
And that is the sort of symbolic death. He's dying as his identity as a child and turning into an adult. Samhain really represents those death elements. So we can use the wheel of the year to kind of represent the different cycles that we go throughout our life, and really a soulful agriculture, if you will, I guess you can say, but that's how it happens. So to clarify, I should say there are 8 sabbats for those who don't understand, or for those who are not familiar with the wheel of the year. They're called sabbats or holidays. They start with Samhain, that's the witch's new year, goes to Yule, which is what Muggles would call Christmas, then goes to Imbolc, which Christians might know as St. Bridget's Day. Astra is Easter, Beltane is May Day, Letha is Midsummer or the summer solstice, Lammas is Harvest Day, which I know is really popular in the Caribbean, and then Mabon, of course, which just happened and is the autumn equinox.
I love it. And it was really struck me when you were talking then about in the agricultural, that's like a manifestation, isn't it? I'm going to give the offering to the gods, so I'll get something back.
That's
It
right.
just shows how all those threads have been woven through time and you're now utilizing them in that. And another thing that's big for you, I mean, obviously I've stalked your Instagram, I've been all over your website, is ritual. Talk to me about the importance for you of ritual.
Oh, so I love rituals because they they're really tangible, right? When you manifest, it's hard sometimes to visualize and see that happening without doing much of anything. But having a ritual is something you can hold on to. It's like a series of steps that you can actually work, and it makes you feel like you're doing something or you're investing in the energy. And rituals are really important. That's why we have things like graduations. They really celebrate these milestones, or they celebrate accomplishments, or they celebrate, crossing the threshold from one place to another. That's probably the best example of just crossing that threshold.
Yeah.
That's what manifestation is, right? We're doing the ritual to get out of the mundane and into the magical, and bring something to life out of this whole process. So that's why I love rituals for that purpose. And I use rituals and spells and ceremonies interchangeably. I know they're a little bit different, but they all essentially do the same thing, which is, gives us something physical to work with so that we can direct our energy more easily.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, obviously you can manifest without a crystal or without an herb or all of that, but it's I personally believe it becomes a lot easier when you're saying, okay, I'm adding this crystal for wealth. I'm adding this herb for success. I'm adding this, ritual oil for shining my light more, and being able to kind of mix up your own little batter of goodness and sending it out into the world. And that's how I've always gone about my manifestations. I've always had some sort of physical practice. And I truly believe that if I didn't have that, if I didn't have something to actually look at and say, okay, I'm putting all of my energy into this spell here or this ritual here, it would have been a lot harder for me. Um, so I think, you know, obviously there's many seasoned witches who can do it without a ritual. I certainly have done my fair share of that, but if you're a beginner especially, I think a ritual is a great place to start, just to be able to, you know, kind of put a target board on your wall so you have something to throw at.
I love this. And as there are never any mistakes in the universe, are there? Because recently that's exactly where I've been called. And I've been working with spirit for ages now, 14 years. But recently I've just thought, I want to have something intentional for me to do to occupy my Capricorn tendencies of do, which we know gets in the way with any form of manifestation, the urge to create work for oneself. So that's really interesting to have you on at this exact time, just when I've been thinking about how I'm going to do it. I love it. Fantastic. And so you've got your book, which is Apothecary, which is a guide to ritual and herbs and oils and everything, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah. So is that a really good starting place for somebody who is a beginner and new to all this, who's wanting to take their first steps?
It is a really great starting place, and I did it really with the beginner in mind. So there's two sections of the book. Um, just to give a little bit of context, I was doing apothecary and herbalism and aromatherapy years, just miles before I had started doing anything in the witchcraft and witchery space. So that's
Interesting.
really my first love. That's kind of where I started. It all started with a little container of coconut oil, and it kind of just went from there. Um,
I love it.
and and so when I started doing ritual and magic, first of all, I feel like if you do any sort of herbalism or aromatherapy, one way or another, you're going to find yourself to witchery or like magic. You can say that you're not going to, or you can say I don't want to do that, but like some form or fashion, you're going to find your way there. So I think it's a natural fit and a natural pairing, and I found that connection kind of right away. So if you are a beginner starting with ritual, you have the first half of the book where I talk about just how to make how to make an apothecary in general, you know, how to go about choosing crystals, herbs, working in aesthetics, because for me having an aesthetically pleasing product is just as much a part of the process as anything else. So I talk you through all of those steps where even if you didn't want to do it for magical purposes, you could create a very nice apothecary for yourself just off of that. And then
Mhm.
in the second half of the book, I provide over 100 recipes for you to try that are based off of the Wheel of the Year. So if you're someone who's interested in the Wheel of the Year and you're interested in apothecary, you kind of get a 2-for-1 special, and they're broken up by each sabbat. And then you can take these recipes. I give you little tips along the way where I show you how you can really make them your own, because I can make a product for you, but if I don't know you personally, or if I don't know your story, or if I don't really know your intention, there's only so much I can do. You know, I can make a love oil for 3,000 people, but everyone experiences love in a different way. Whereas
Yeah.
you can take this recipe that I've provided for you and really alter it to fit your needs in the way that what you're looking for. So I give you these recipes as a starting place. You can literally take my recipes, chop them up, use them as a guide, there's a whole section of base recipes where you can go and change it for the ingredients that suit your needs, or you can use them as is and just make a wonderful, you know, apothecary potion.
Oh, it's so much fun. And so if where do I begin with all these questions I've got bubbling? I've got to try and make sense of my brain. You got a herb for that?
Yes, actually, you should use clary sage in your aromatherapy diffuser and drink mint tea.
I have a bit of a thing for clary sage, so that's no surprise that you would say that. That's so funny. Is there sort of a when you're working with herbs and herbalism, as you were saying that, you know, individual potions for individual people, do you find that plants bring their own individual vibrations that need to be taken into account, or are they pretty steady?
That is a great question, actually. And 100% plants, and like an individual plant has an individual personality. In fact, I talk about this all the time with my house plants. Like, I kid you not, I have like multiples of the same plants. I have clippings off of the same plants, and each one has a completely different personality. I mean, some it could, like, I have this clipping, for example. I don't know if you can see it, but this clipping,
Yeah.
for example, came from a bigger plant. And this one loves sun. The bigger plant does not. It loves to be in the shade. Like, they're just two completely different creatures. So I think that plants do have personalities. And I know it's weird to think about, but they are living creatures, just like you and me, just like your pets. You know, they are living, breathing creatures. They have their own personalities. And you can build a relationship by working with each individual plant. If you're growing your own herbs in your own garden, you know, you might develop a whole list of correspondences just from corresponding with your plant and working with it, that you could then use into your ritual potions and your spells and all of that. So that absolutely adds another layer. 100%. I didn't write about that in the book, but now I'm feeling like I've got to go start a book right now just to start talking about that.
Yeah, well, it's so fascinating, isn't it? Because when we moved into this house, there was a sage in the back garden. And I said to my husband, that sage is massive. No one needs a sage that big. You know, of course, wasn't spiritual then. Went on this whole crazy unfoldment thing, like live, breathe for that sage, use it all the time for it, for various things. So it knew that I needed it, even if I was like, hey, what are you doing? It's so interesting. I love it. I love it. So if you were going to give somebody sort of I know this is going to be really hard, but like a top 10 things that you would need to start yourself off, apart from your book, which will count as number one, what would you suggest to people to get to bring to, like, start a kit off? What are the basics?
Oh, that's such an interesting question, because I think so. I'm always speaking in duality. You're going to learn this about me, but there's the answer that the old Lorraine would have given, and there's an answer that the Lorraine today would give. So I'll
Good.
start with the old one. The old Lorraine would probably say you need a crystal and herb, probably an oracle deck. We're using the book as an example, but a couple of resource guides. Definitely one on correspondences for sure. Not a big super one, but one that's like manageable. Um, a really good cup of something delicious, tea or coffee or whatever your jam is, because I believe that what you put in your body is just as important as what you work with outside of your body. And something to clear your energy and something to protect your energy. Now, the new Lorraine is kind of looking at things a little bit differently. I think, you know, I really came up in the days of spirituality and magic where everyone was doing everything, right? It was just like do all the things. You had to be an astrologer and a witch, and you had to know numerology and oracle cards, and, you know, literally do
Everything.
everything.
Yeah.
And now I think we're starting to peel back those layers and be much more intentional and say, okay, this is the path I want to walk. I don't need to do all of these things. I don't need to write spells for everyone and read oracle cards and, you know, do all of these things. I just really want to focus on these three things here. And so when you start to do that, your needs really shift and you start looking at things that are related specifically for what you want to focus on. So I think that's more important, is figuring out where you feel a natural alignment with the practice that you want to take on, and then really tailoring your kit for that. But just basic for everyone, you definitely need something to clear, something to protect, something to open your heart space, something to give you confidence, something to open your intuition. Um, and I say something because, you know, for one person it might be an herb, for another person it might be a symbol, for another person it might be a piece of artwork. It could be a little bit different for everyone. Something to ground, gotta have grounding. um and something to inspire you, to really get you out of your comfort zone and to kind of get those creative juices going.
I love it. I'm loving talking to you. I can't stop beaming at you because I'm just, this is so cool. So, talking of inspiration, you've
Mhm.
set up for my next question very nicely there, Lorraine. Where do you feel like your inspiration comes from? Is it you? Is it your soul? Is it the universe source? What's your belief system?
Hmm. I think a little bit of everything. For one, I am really an ideas person. I'm just always coming up with ideas for everyone. Like, you cannot, I think it actually gets on my friends' nerves because they'll come to me with something and like in 5 seconds, I'm like, here's 15 ideas, take it and go. But at the same time, I really believe that the reason why I'm such an ideas person is because of the way my astrology chart is built. When you look at my placements, you can see there's a lot of like just natal placements that are like well suited towards inspiration and ideas and growth. So in that way, I think that's really a cosmos things. I think that the universe just dropped this in me as a gift. But having said that, I think anybody can find inspiration. It's not like I have, my chart may be set up for that way, but it's not like it's not accessible for anyone. So the way that I think I get the most inspiration is just looking at things that have nothing to do with magic and ritual. Honestly, I just look for beauty in everything. For example, when I had my apothecary, when I was making apothecary labels, I didn't go on Pinterest and say, well, show me apothecary labels. I looked at wine bottles. I looked at bottles of medicine. I looked at sometimes perfume bottles. I looked at things that have absolutely nothing to do with what I was doing and said, okay, how can I find beauty in this? How can I find resonance in this? And I think that that's a great way to go about getting inspired for anyone. Just looking at things that you enjoy, if you love watching ants crawl around with leaves, see if you can get some inspiration out of that. And I know it sounds weird, and I use a really weird example on purpose, but it's in your weirdness that you find all the good stuff. It really is. And I think it's so important to just follow those breadcrumbs. And if you can do that without judging yourself, I guarantee you, like, all the ideas are going to come, all the creativity is going to open up, all the inspiration is going to happen. You just got to stop saying, I'm weird, I don't know why I'm doing this, I don't know why I'm thinking this way. Just let yourself be weird, and it will happen. Because if it were normal what you were doing, or if it was something everyone else was doing, it wouldn't be an inspired idea, would it? It would just
No,
be what everyone else is doing.
completely agree. So I love it. You're working through all of these, I mean, your oracle packs, your books. Do you find a lot of that you have the time to be able to do the things for yourself that you also want to do with your rituals? Are you very dedicated to like a daily practice, and what does that look like?
So no, I have no time at all.
I had a
I
feeling.
have, yeah, I have no time at all. But at the same time, I have tried to be very intentional about setting. When I first started, I worked 7 days a week, like, all the time. I did that for years. Now I'm trying to set aside the weekends. I'm like, I'm not going to do anything on the weekend, but I'm really not the type of person to sit on the couch and just watch TV. I have to be doing something. Otherwise, I would just work. Um, but to answer your question, I never have time, but I do try and make time. I really
Mm-hmm.
try and make it um something that I have to do. And like, I plan out my weekends specifically. I have a whole list, and I have a self-care ritual section of things that I want to do for the weekend. I don't always get it right. There are plenty of times where I set out with the best of intentions. Like this morning, I set out with the intention to get up at 7 a.m. and go on a run. It did not happen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to beat myself up over it. But as long as I think you're putting the energy into saying, okay, I know I want to do this ritual, I know this is the time that I want to do it, I think you have much more chances of success of just giving yourself that space and knowing it's something that you want to do. And if nothing else, it's in the back of your brain. I'll do it eventually. It may take me a day or two, but I do ebb and flow in my practice. I don't always get it right as much as I want to, and as much as I preach about it. I'm being totally honest that I say I'm going to do a ritual every day, and some weeks I do. Some weeks I'm really, really great at it, and I'm really present in it. And other weeks I've got deadlines, and I've got meetings and interviews and all sorts of things, and I'm like, you know what? I just can't get to it this week, and that's
Yeah.
okay. That's totally okay, just as long as you come back to your practice.
I love it. And that's very honest, but I also think really important for people to hear, because I find that a lot of people, and I know I come at things from a mediumship perspective, but a lot of people sort of cut themselves off from because they're judging. Oh, I haven't, I
Mm-hmm.
said I was going to do this every day and I haven't done it every day. And when you talk about manifestation and spell work and using that kind of stuff, you can cut yourself off, can't you, from that power
That's right.
by judging yourself. So I'm glad that you were honest and you didn't say, well, Hannah, I start the day with yoga and this and that. We'd all be going, oh God, we can never achieve that.
I mean, I would love to think that I could do those things, but I think it's important to have something that is aspirational but also accessible, right? Like there's the balance. You have to have that. You have to have something to work towards where you're getting out of your comfort zone, but not such a grand goal to where you're never going to achieve it. I think that's more important when trying to manifest. Like if you want to go out and manifest $1 million and you've got 50 cents in your pocket, that's probably not going to be that achievable, but you have to start with little increments, and then you can build your confidence, and eventually as you get comfortable you can grow. But I think it's just like trying to lose 20 pounds by doing one exercise. That's not really sustainable, and we have to have sustainability in our practice too. We
Mm.
have to be able to build a practice that supports not only the lifestyle we want, but the lifestyle we have. It's a journey. It's really a process.
I love it. You are totally magical. So I want to take you back to your origin story. You've gone, you've applied for this job. It is like something out of a film. I just love it. I've got you already in my head, seeing this, cryptic advert, and you're going in there. Like when you went in there, like how did they start you off on this? Obviously, you said you had your herbalism and your stuff before then as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what did they get you doing? How did it all unfold for you?
So they were moving. They had this company for a while, but they were moving from Northern California to Southern California. So they were building their team from scratch, and at the same time, really going from a smaller, maybe mid-sized Etsy store to world domination. That was pretty much their trajectory. So really when we had the interview, it was more of a conversation. We were just talking about our interests. She clearly said I am a witch. She didn't have any problems about saying it. And I started talking about doing herbalism and aromatherapy and all of that. And she said, "Oh my God, there's this whole thing of magical herbalism." And at the time, I had never really heard about. I had actually, that's not true. It was in all of the books that I had, but I didn't realize what I was looking at. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
was there, but I didn't. She really connected the dots for me. Um, so she started talking about that, and she said, "Well, we weren't going to hire for someone now, but we really need someone to do product development for us, because at the time they were listing, I don't know, maybe like 6 to 10 new products every single day, like
Wow.
365 days of the year." And so I had just the specific set of skills for that job. I had already knew about all of the herbalism. I had already knew about all of the earthy things. And then coming from a e-commerce background in fashion, in product management, and doing all of that, it was just like, couldn't have been a better fit. So and I was already making like lotions and creams and conditioners and all of that stuff at the time. So she just started me with that. She's like, you're going to head up the product department, which eventually led up to me just heading up the logistical department, or just really everything. We kind of just worked hand in hand. And so I had a fair amount of knowledge, but I had to take a crash course. I really
Yeah.
did, because there was a whole other world that I had to learn. So then I went in, I did about 6 months of Wiccan priestess training, and really, took a deep dive into the world and learned as much as I could, and just making products every day, trial and error. That was what she had me do.
Love it. I love it. And so you mentioned that she was just out there, out of the closet, out of the witchy closet. How about you? How's your experience of stepping out of the witchy closet been?
Okay, so I'm going to give another one of those honest answers.
Yeah.
When I'm in the bubble, the online bubble, it's really easy to be my full self. It's super easy to get stuck in whatever world you've crafted for yourself online. So there, no problem. Out in the world, not as easy. I'm getting more comfortable with it. For a long time, I would tell people that I'm a writer or that I run an apothecary business. I kind of left out the witchy part.
Yeah.
Um, Specifically because when I first started, I was more open with it. And I just remember this one time I was talking to this woman in like the DMV, and we were having a great conversation. I was telling her about my apothecary. And I gave her my card. She was so excited until she saw the word witch. And like when I tell you her face dropped to the floor, like it just literally melted off of her face. And she looked at the card and she pointed to the word witch exactly. And she turned it around and she was like, "Did you mean this word?" And I said, "Well, yes, it's on the card." And she went, "Oh." And then she dropped my card in the trash can right in front of me. Um, and I was just like devastated because we had had this great conversation. And that really was the first time I was comfortable saying that to a stranger. And just that whole episode really just like broke
Yeah,
my
for
heart.
sure.
So I really hid it for a while, for a long while actually. And now really just probably this year I've been much more comfortable with saying, look, this is just what it is. I'm an oracle deck author, you know what I mean? I write witchy stuff, I do witchy things, this is just what it is. And now it's been, I don't want to say great, but more people are comfortable, or at least if they're not comfortable, they ask questions. I told this girl I wrote witchy books, and she was like, "No one's ever said that to me. That's so interesting. Can you tell me more about it?" And so
Yeah.
now that we've had people who are working up to it, I think it's much easier to come out of the closet and say that, and have people at least be curious. And if they're judgmental, they're holding it back. But also, I think this is also me doing a lot of work and realizing that when my energy is in the right place, I attract the right people. So maybe that could be a part of it too.
Well, yeah, I agree with that, but I also think people are peoply sometimes, and there's
Yeah.
no amount of anything you do to yourself that can change a muggle. But I love it. And that does take me to practical magic where they're all judged in the town.
Yes.
So
100%.
yeah, that's your prep for all of that. How much, but obviously you are, you're a force, you have this huge energy rising through you, all of this inspiration, all of this creativity. How much creative control do you have over the look of your packs and the content of them? Do you really get to express yourself?
Yes. I would say I probably have 90% creative control. I have been really fortunate. I do have a lot of control, definitely over the content. I can pretty much write whatever I want. We do have an editing process where the editor comes back and makes suggestions, but I can't, and I have said, "Hey, look, this is what it's going to be like. Find a way to get on board with it." Especially because, I mean, I have to say it that way because, as an editor, not all of the editors are familiar with witchcraft and witchery.
No.
They're just editing from a purely grammatical point of view and they don't know what they're talking about. So I have to really say, like, this is what it is. And in most cases, that's fine. In most
Yeah.
cases, it's not a big deal. Uh, with the cards and everything, total creative control over that. I work with the artist, I give her a brief, we go back and forth. The packaging, not so much. The packaging is where we start to lose a little bit of control. We do get a say, but sometimes, the publisher will come in and say, "Hey, look, this is what we want to do." Um, and the same thing with the books. Like, it's really the cover and the packaging where they really like to put down the gauntlet. But for
Yeah.
everything else, I feel like it's been pretty easy going, and I have most like pretty much all creative control, which is really nice because I don't do rules. I'm not a rules person. I do not like, if you try and tell me what to do, like I will rebel. I will literally
Same.
light everything on fire. Like I just I can't do it. I've never been good at following
Yeah,
rules,
for
and I just
sure.
gotta accept that about myself. So I think it's really important because not all publishers are like that. Not all
Mhm.
publishers so much freedom, but I work really well with my publisher. So thank God, knock on wood, that it stays the same way all the time. And yeah.
Fantastic. And talking about editing and grammatical errors leads me nicely in to your name. Have I been calling you the right name? I'm assuming I have, because I'm assuming you'd have corrected me, but you have an unusual spelling of Lorraine, don't you?
I do. So it's pronounced Lorraine. So you got it right, but it's spelled Lorriane. And it's some weird family thing. It's a generational name. It goes back like 3 generations. I don't know why it's spelled that way. No one seems to know why it's spelled that way and pronounced a different way, but it is pronounced Lorraine.
Excellent. Good. And that's good to get that out there and be called your true self, especially with, I mean, I guess when you come from a witchcraft perspective and things like that, this is the intention, isn't it, of the words that you use and the energy behind them. And so your name is a massive representation of that.
And so I've got a funny story, actually. You're so right, but I let my publishers call me Lorriane for years, like 3 years. And we ended up going to this witchy conference and we were having dinner, and my publisher kept saying Lorriane, and I had to I stopped her and I was like, I've just got to say my name is pronounced Lorraine. And one of the publishing assistants was like, see, I told you, we've been saying her name wrong this whole time. No one is called Lorriane. That's not a name. And it was just this whole thing. Um, and and the publisher said, why didn't you tell me? And I said, you know what? I let it go on for so long that I felt like I couldn't say anything. But at that time, I was in a period of really understanding that I hadn't been standing in my own power. Like I had been neglecting myself and my energy by letting my name be spoken inappropriately, incorrectly. And so that was a real pivotal moment for me when I realized I had not really been truly embracing my power. And so I switched that. And now it's very important because, like, as you say, your name is how you identify yourself. Like that's the first thing you're given in this world is your name. And it's important.
I love it. Us Brits, we have a real problem with that. We can just about manage to say pardon if somebody says their name and we don't quite catch it. And from that point onwards, if we don't get it on the second round, we will never call you by your name again because we find it so desperately awkward to ask you to say it. I've got friends that are Canadian and American and they'll just go, sorry, what? Say it again, what? Whereas us Brits, we go, I have no idea what that was. And we just shuffle off into the backdrop. It's so funny.
Well, that makes me wonder. So I have had my DNA tested a couple of times, and I always get somewhere between 15 to 20% British, somewhere in there. So now I'm wondering if that's my British side coming out in.
I bet it is. We won't correct you. You can call us the wrong name. People call me Heather all the time, and I just go,
Yeah,
very
that's
well.
what I did.
Yeah.
I just kind of went, yeah, that's it. That's right.
That's that bit of British just manifesting its way through you there. You're welcome. So, Lorraine, what is next for you? What, I mean, you've obviously got huge plans, huge ideas. What are you going to do next?
Okay, so I have so many things. I really want to tell you about this next series that I'm working on, but I haven't been given the go ahead yet, but I'm super excited about it. So just know that there's a new series coming. Um, I am finishing up my second book. So The Witch's Apothecary is going to have a sister about this time next year. So, pay attention on Instagram at Spirit Element to see all of that. And then so what I'm most excited about now that I can talk about the most is I'm going to be doing tarot and oracle classes because people have been asking me for years, and I think I do have a really unusual style and perspective in the way that I both read and write oracle and tarot cards. So I'm going to be kind of just teaching all of my tips and tricks. There's going to be a few different offerings to where you can, find the one that works for you, and yeah, you can get to learn from me. So I'm trying to, I like to stay humble. I don't want to brag about myself, but two people who I very love and respect to have called me the icon of Oracle and the queen of Oracle. And I feel like I'm just going to take those titles and really add that onto my bandwagon. So
Sure.
I've made so many Oracle decks at this point. I feel like I've got an unusual perspective. So if you're interested in learning about tarot and Oracle cards, and if you're interested in learning how to write your own Oracle deck, please stay tuned.
Amazing. And obviously I will put a link to your website in the show notes so people can check you out. But you have got an unusual take. I mean, I'm just looking at the ones I pulled myself before we went online. But you don't get mountain cabin. You don't get cards like that. They have got a really unique energy, and we're just gonna Reaper. I know that's what I'm going through at the moment, no doubt, no doubt. But also it's just so lovely. It's such a gorgeous card. So fascinating, and I can't wait to watch where you go next because I have no doubt that it's going to be amazing.
Lots of big things coming.
Yeah, definitely. You can feel the energy of it coming right the way through you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Absolutely. I was happy to be here. And this was such a great conversation. You asked some amazing questions. I really appreciate that.
Good, excellent. Thank you.